When I was 18, I worked part-time in a bar in my hometown in Yorkshire, England. It was a small town and the pub wasn't particularly big. There were only ever 2 members of staff working at any time. Anyway, one random Wednesday night at about 8 p.m, there was a thunderstorm. It was quiet in the pub, just me and a girl called Sarah working and a few regulars drinking. Sarah was my age, so we were both pretty young. About half an hour into the storm, a group of lads came into the pub. They were all about a year or two older than me and pretty drunk. I could immediately tell they were going to be trouble. They were really loud and making sexual jokes about Sarah while she took their orders, so I told her I'd finished taking their orders. They carried on being loud and obnoxious until we called last orders. Then they refused to leave and demanded to be served more drinks. When I refused, they started threatening me, saying that they'd kick the shit out of me if they didn't get more drinks. It was pretty scary, but I managed to stay calm, on the outside at least. I told them I couldn't serve them any more drinks and reminded them that they were on camera because the pub had CCTV. When I told them that, they finally left. Sarah and I spent about 5 minutes talking about how awful they were, then we finished closing everything up. The storm was still going strong when I left the pub about 40 minutes later. Sarah and I live opposite ends of the town, so we part ways as soon as we get out of work. I pulled my hood up and got my head down and started walking towards my parents' house, which was about 10 minutes walk away. I could barely see as I walked because the wind was blowing rain so hard into my face. All I could hear was the rain in my ears and the thunder and lightning above me. I had been walking for what was probably about 5 minutes when I thought I heard shouting behind me. I wasn't really sure if I'd heard it because of the storm, so I kept walking without looking back. Then I definitely heard someone shout, "Oi!" I looked back and saw the lads from the pub approaching. God knows why they're out in this storm. I guess the beer was keeping them warm. One of them shouted something, but I couldn't hear it because of the wind. I didn't want to stick around to find out what they said, so I just started running. Well, I guess this triggered those lads because they started running after me. It felt like my instincts were guiding me home because I could barely see anything as it was dark and the noise of the rain and thunderstorm were making it disorientating. I took a quick look over my shoulder and nevertheless I could still see those guys chasing me. They were getting close. Now this is where it gets really mad though. As I'm about 10 yards from my front door, lightning strikes the metal door handle. Looking back, it was pretty epic to see, but it was terrifying at the time, especially with those lads being so close behind me. The lightning stopped me in my tracks for a second. I didn't know if I'd get a shock if I touched the door handle. I looked over my shoulder and saw that the lads had stopped. I guess the lightning had stunned them too. So I went around to the back door of the house and knocked on the back door. My dad answered the door and asked what was going on. I told him about the lightning, but I didn't tell him about the group of lads because I didn't want to worry him. He said he'd heard the noise but didn't realize that that was what it was, the lightning. I went to bed but didn't really sleep. It was a pretty crazy experience. Storms never used to bother me, but now I don't like going out in them. I've always loved thunderstorms since I was a kid, and my 7-year-old daughter shares the same fascination with me. Whenever a storm comes, we sit together in the back garden under our gazebo, listening to the thunder and watching the rain pour. One warm British night in early September, as lightning cracked in the sky, my daughter excitedly suggested we go outside. Without hesitation, we dashed with the rain to the gazebo, getting soaked along the way. Our gazebo is cozy. I've kitted it out with a minibar, garden sofas, a TV, and a small fire pit. I turned on the fire pit and the TV and we relaxed, enjoying the rain's sound and the thunder's rumble. The storm steadily grew more intense and lightning lit up the sky more frequently, each fort made our garden glow. Our garden is big for a British garden. It stretches down quite a long way and is bordered by woods on two sides. After a particularly bright flash, my daughter pointed towards the woods, claiming to see someone there. I walked to the edge of the gazebo to look, waiting for the next lightning flash. Sure enough, when the sky illuminated again, I saw a figure standing near the woods. A little concerned, I sent my daughter to turn on the backyard lights and she hurried inside to do so. But despite the lights on and the occasional lightning, the person was nowhere to be seen. Feeling uneasy, we headed inside and I locked the doors and turned on more lights, both in the back garden and the front garden. I wasn't going to worry my wife with all this because it was probably nothing, but my daughter had already told her. She suggested calling the police, but I lied, saying that the person had left. I told her it was a woman because I knew she'd find that less worrying. As the storm continued, the three of us watched a movie, but when it was time for my daughter to go to bed, she seemed frightened and claimed to have seen someone at a bedroom window. My wife and I were alarmed. I grabbed a golf club and braved the rain to check the garden. I searched every corner, even under the gazebo and deck. At last, on the side of the house, I glimpsed someone in a hood, half hidden, looking like a man. I shouted and ran towards them, but they vanished. Back inside, I reassured my family that the man had been scared off. My wife was still worried, especially now she knew it was a man. We closed all the blinds and, thankfully, the rest of the night passed without incident. To ease my daughter's fear, we let her sleep in our bed. While I didn't witness it, I can only imagine how unsettling it must have been for her to see a man at a window at such a young age. It was late at night and I was finishing up at the office. I was working until the building closed because we had a big deal coming up. The weather was terrible and I was about to head home. It was around 11 p.m. during a thunderstorm. I was driving a crappy Honda Jazz at the time, not the best car for bad weather and wet roads. I drove my usual way home, but the rain was so heavy that even the highest windshield wiper setting didn't help much. I could barely see the road. I was going slower than the speed limit, only 40 miles per hour on a 55 mile per hour road. The weather was that bad. There were no other cars around. As I was driving, a lot of water built up on the windshield, too fast for the wipers to handle. I was training my neck to get as close to the windscreen as possible, when suddenly through the water, I saw someone dressed in white run out in front of me, from one side of the road to the other. It happened so fast that I had to slam on the brakes and swerve to avoid hitting them. I swerved and lost control of the car, ended up on the grass before crashing into a tree. The airbag popped out and I was jolted forward into it. I was shocked and couldn't believe what had just happened. Luckily, I didn't seem to be injured. Slowly, I started to look around my car, trying to find the person I saw running across the road. I was in the middle of a main road that connects the city to the next town. There were no buildings for miles around and no other cars. It didn't make sense for someone to be walking here, especially in this weather at this time of night. I was worried and in shock, so I called my brother first, but he didn't answer. Then I called my flatmate, same result. I didn't want to bother my parents, but I had no choice. I called my dad, and even though it was very late, he picked up. I explained what happened and that I needed help. He gave me the number for our family's roadside assistance and said he'd come and meet me. He told me not to get out of the car to look for the person who had crossed the road. He told me to keep my doors locked. I was scared, sitting in the car and looking out of every window despite the heavy rain. And then I suddenly felt like someone was there, and I turned to see a soaking wet man in white looking into my car with a strange expression. He put his hands on the glass and started rubbing the windows. I screamed at him to go away. He tried to open the locked door and then started hitting the window with his elbow. I was terrified and called my dad again. He told me not to open the doors and that he was almost there. I stayed on the line with my dad as the man outside continued to hit the window. I was screaming and it was scaring my dad having to listen to it on the phone. After a few more minutes of this, I saw headlights approaching and realized it was my dad. My dad's a big bloke. He got out of the car, charged at the guy and tackled him as he tried to run into the woods. My dad held him down as I called the police. The tow truck arrived and the police showed up soon after. The man was arrested and we pressed charges. I didn't go to court, but my dad and our lawyer did. I didn't want to see that man again. The scary face he made and the way he tried to relentlessly break into my car will stay with me for a long time.